Good evening, everybody.
Good evening, sir. How are you?
I'm doing okay. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. Welcome to the call. Good to see you.
Yeah, you too. Everybody. Well, I think people are, yeah, it looks like everyone's joined in. So we are on day three. We're actually more than 3 days in, but this is the third challenge. So day three, third call. And today's call is about, again, our intention, as we told you in the beginning, how do we create habits that promote longevity, that slow down our aging, that help us eliminate all of what's going on in these fantastic bodies that cause disease. And I can tell you in my personal journey, there's something that I'd been doing for a while, not with the intention of getting better. In fact, that was completely outside of my awareness. I just thought being sick was normal. I did it for religious reasons. And I noticed that it was at that time of year where I would get the compliments, where I was told things are better, you're doing okay. My skin issues would go away. My cognition was upregulated. I actually had better capacity for work, duration, all of that stuff, my endurance. But I never put two and two together until I started learning from, including a gentleman who's going to join us here today, how powerful fasting is. And we grew up, all of us, in a culture where starvation was taboo, right? And it was considered poverty, weakness. It was considered the lack of success. It was considered something that would make you sick. And our parents told us this, not because they were trying to hurt us, because that's also what they were told, the four food groups, right? And if you look at the current now, take that and fast forward till today, you have this food pyramid that puts synthetic eggs over ground beef in terms of priority of what you should be eating. So it's very important to understand how little our bodies actually need and how often we need a break that we call fasting. I'm going to dive into this with you, and we're actually going to have a challenge with you, and I'm going to do it too. So I'm going to be side by side with you doing this, and I'll announce it at the end, and it's going to hurt, and no pain, no gain. So if you're here to succeed and win, you got to go through a little bit of pain to get a lifetime of benefit, and you're going to want to do it again because you're going to feel so good. Meanwhile, before starting and getting into that, we're blessed today to have somebody join us, one of the founders of the company who I would say if it wasn't for this man, we wouldn't none of us would be here today. Straightforward. A lot of you know Mansoor Mohammed is the scientist for whom, if it wasn't for him taking genetics, this complicated academic science, and turning it into something functional, we wouldn't have a tool today. If it wasn't for Dr. Bryce Wild, who just joined in, we wouldn't have a product. We wouldn't have the thinking that genetics could be easy. It was him that came to the table, helped us form this company as a founder, and said, "Why is it only the ivory tower talks about this stuff? This is our genetic code. Why doesn't everybody know it?" And broke it down simply so we actually understood it. And he actually inspired me to heal myself. So first of all, thanks, Bryce, for joining us. Oh, you're still mute. One sec, we'll get that. There we go. Oh, still can't hear you.
Hear me now?
Yeah, there you go.
Sorry about that, guys. And thank you so much for those very kind words, Cash. If it wasn't for your brilliant foresight and for knowledge, I don't know if you got a crystal ball somewhere in there. Sometimes it seems like you do to me. But walking into my clinic that day with that ideation that the market needs and desires personalized functional medicine. I can have all the ideas that I want, but you came in with that vision. So thank you. And thank you for being, an incredible guidance and light in all of our lives and sharing the knowledge. There's a gift to your ability to make it translatable into all of our lives as well. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, pleasure. We've all built it together, so we're all now, and that's why we're all here to benefit from it, right? So at that time, what Bryce just mentioned, he blew my mind in terms of what was possible. And he's going to talk to you about today. And why are we doing this? because what I'm going to ask you to do may sound difficult. Once you do it, you're going to be so happy that you did. It's just like going to the gym. You can procrastinate, and even when you're at the gym with the weight sitting in front of you, you still don't want to do it. But when you finish that workout, you're so satisfied and happy that you pushed yourself and did it, right? And we still struggle. Whoever's even the best trainer in the world still struggles getting to the gym sometimes. Same thing is true with this thing that we're going to get to, which is fasting. And Bryce did something that is borderline miraculous in terms of a fast that he went through. He actually has traveled the world to visit ingredient manufacturers, visit various, for various learnings for his books, for his documentaries and things that he's put out there to help teach the world. And one of the things he did was go to Asia and survive on this tea fast. And I had never heard of anything like this when Bryce had told me this. I didn't even intermittent fast other than my religious fast that I did. And I just thought this guy's nuts. It just, you'll be dead. What are you talking about? He's like, no, I've done this. It actually, I've done it and I felt amazing and everybody needs to do it. That opened my eyes to the human body's potential. And it also opened my eyes to how little we need and how much we're overdoing consumption for a couple reasons. One, because we just believe, we have a food pyramid that's designed by industry to sell things as opposed to what's best for us. Second, we have food that has no nutrient density. So you need to eat massive volumes to get the nutrients to live and be healthy. Though that combination has led to what we see. We have the most obese empire that's ever lived in the United States, right? So having said all that, Bryce is going to tell you about his experience to show you what the potential is and what's possible so that nobody says that, no, I'm not going to do this challenge. You are. Go ahead, Bryce.
I love it. I love the analogy that you pose as it relates to training. Physical trainers, exercise, by the way, fits into this category of hormetins, and we're all coming to learn a little bit more about this. That Goldilocks amount of stress to the body, because ultimately, and we are in the business. By business, I mean incredible interest, vested interest, both in time as well as reaching and teaching the masses of DNA, the business of DNA. And that Goldilocks amount of stress, our DNA and our evolution has accommodated to. And so we've gotten used to that. Not only used to it, we need it and we crave it. So whereas exercise and the right amount, not too much, that'll hurt you. Not too little, won't really do much. But just that Goldilocks amount that your trainer and eventually yourself can become acclimatized to, your body responds favorably. There's a lot of fads out there right now. If you use them appropriately, they can advantage you in incredible ways health-wise. And that is cold exposure or maybe sauna exposures. These are two other examples of hormetins. It's a bell curve. Too little, spend 2 minutes in a sauna, it's not going to do much for you. An hour, you're probably going to become electrolyte depleted. But that perfect zone, that hormetic Goldilocks zone, that's what we're talking about. And that is fasting. There's so much more to fasting than this metabolic switch that a lot of people talk about, from glucose, to fat and subsequent weight loss. It's a key, but really much more importantly is this process where we re-insulin sensitize. But the hormetic effects, full circle, of prolonged fasting, and we'll define prolonged. It's not as long as you think, and yes, I did survive it. Extends into lifespan. It extends into the prevention of the big C, cancer. But I also wanted to come back to something you said, very importantly, Cash, that there's this, whether I realized it or not, and it doesn't speak to denomination of religion, but spiritual connection in fasting. It was part of this experience. So I experienced a Denjiki. And actually a little bit of backstory, this famous story of the scrolls of Mount Shigi, deep in the northern forests of Japan, located in the province of Yamato, is related to this legendary warrior monk Benkei at the temple itself that was built there, and then whole little communities were built around this. But anyways, according to legend, in the 20th century, this warrior monk Benkei is a historical figure known for this great strength and loyalty, prayed for victory at this temple on Mount Shigi before major significant battles. And his prayer for success in the battle between two clashing clans, two samurai families in Japan during the late Han period, was largely based on this preparatory phase of this hormetic stress, which was a danjiki. So it was a 5-day fast, in part fire prayers. By the way, this was part of my experience every morning, waking up and 4:30 in the morning, walking up the side of the mountain to these little mini temple environments and lighting these big fires where these gold dawning robed monks would do fire prayers for a good hour before then we set up on our the rest of our day doing chores. But this spiritual connection, I didn't think I'd find it. I'm not sure exactly what it was, and maybe it was partly explained by the neurochemical shift that occurs into day 2. We can talk a little bit about that as well, the endorphins that occur, the feel-good hormones. But there was certainly that spiritual connection. So I think by saying that, I just want to sort of drive home that whether we understand exactly what's happening, I do feel like there's a higher ability to become enlightened or connected to the spiritual realm when you're fasting. It was primarily a water and green tea fast. I can tell you there was a lot of tips and tricks that I learned from the monks during this practice that they all practice. One thing I learned was, again, the more you get into that second and third day, that hormetic stress, the more alpha wave activity in your brain occurs. And this is what monks rely on. They get better and better at engaging with alpha wave. And that's the state of brain that is honed in on focus and attention, alertness and concentration. And where the body and by the way, the brain and the heart connection is improved significantly. Hormones regulate, metabolism actually increases, all these different things. But the green tea accentuated that. And one of the tips I learned, Kashif, was always keep the belly filled with warm or hot fluids. That is the most masterful trick I think that I learned. And keep occupied. It is so important to keep, and by occupied, I don't mean hyper scheduled or stressed or frazzled doing all kinds of work. We did have chores, cleaning up the environment, sweeping and light chores and so forth. But a well-devised plan, leisurely walk, call a few friends maybe that you haven't spoken to in a while, read a book, engage your brain, listen to a podcast like the DNA Talks podcast, have a favorite essential oil in your pocket, by the way, ready to engage your olfactory bulb and overpower anything that might cause you to feel that you need to eat. We would walk 20 kilometers a day, guided by these monks on their prayer cycles or between their prayer cycles. And on occasion, day 3, which by the way, is actually one of the easier days. So after 48 hours, the third day becomes easier somehow. So the satiety kicks in. But we'd be walking by these fresh Japanese bakeries, and it was not easy. It was tantalizing, and I thought it'd be a lot harder. I thought that it would cause me to lose, an unhealthy amount of weight. As much as I understand and knew the literature, I just felt like this probably wasn't healthy. One of the best things I think I've done and have repeated since on numerous occasions. I typically, restrict it to a day or two, but that 5-day marathon is something I've repeated a few other additional times, and have never felt so good, for the ensuing many weeks and months. And it's a big reset button, by the way. This big red reset button occurs within the neurohormones and some of the satiety hormones that your brain, given your DNA, and that's, we can talk about that. Of course, some of us have an easier time with this than others, but ghrelin, which is that hunger hormone, that intense, I need to eat next, leptin, adiponectin, all these different hormones that are controlled by the brain gut, are reset. These things are literally, you start from anew kind of thing every time you do these 5-day fasts. So there was a spiritual element, the very physical element. I did drop a few pounds, largely fat pounds. I supplemented, we can maybe talk about that, a couple of things to retain muscle mass that I think is important for everybody. But what I experienced and I came to learn after doing even further, more of a deep dive, after having done it, because you immerse yourself in it and you all of a sudden gain that additional perspective, was that of course I had this time for cellular autophagy, allowing, my gut to heal, allowing dead cells. And this is primarily, the evidence is very incredible for resetting the immune system as well. A lot of these, old cells die off and you just get rid of them and your immune system is enhanced. That's why that science around cancer and cancer prevention is so impressive, because you get all these brand new, very ready to attack frontline defense natural killer cells reborn. But you get these reductions in biological and biomarker relative to aging, as you know. You get that boost in BDNF that we test for at the DNA company, the brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is neurogenesis and neuroplasticity, the improved metabolic efficacy. You get stress resistance improvement, or resilience, a lot of people like to refer to it as. So the list is very long. Reduced inflammation, that's another big one. And of course, DNA repair. So we look at DNA pathways and what you can do to intervene to manage genetic expression, but the literal DNA helix is healed. You balance out your methylation markers. So the list is very long. That's a long-winded answer as well, but the experience was incredible, and I encourage everybody, as you're encouraging as well, everyone to try this at least once. And don't dive into a 5-day fast necessarily, but you're going to talk to folks tonight and think about how to do sort of this 2-tiered approach.
And so 5 days, it was literally just green tea. And you said you also took some stuff to retain muscle mass?
Yeah, and and green tea is something that of course contains caffeine. So depending on your CYP1A2 gene and how fast that is, you don't necessarily want to overdo it. I was high on green tea at one point, I can assure you, because we learned also how to make green tea by hand and we had oversampled green tea. The beautiful thing about green tea as opposed to coffee is coffee, and it's got some other, interesting things, polyphenols and bioflavonoids and so forth, a lot higher concentration in green tea. But the caffeine concentration in coffee is kind of standalone, where the caffeine is offset in green tea by theanine. And theanine has that alpha wave upregulation as well. And again, this is what the monks appreciate from green tea. It helps to elevate their capacity and ability to meditate and get into and remain in alpha wave, which is that focused, alert concentration without any sedation. So they get that focused alertness through that additional green tea. The thing is, if you're slow with metabolizing caffeine, too much green tea, just like too much coffee, can cause the jitters, and it can cause you to be slightly imbalanced. So we would offset, through some tisanes or herbal, decoctions, which is basically like your herbal teas without caffeine. Just keeping warm liquids flowing through your system was so incredibly important. But then there's this amino acid that's been actually, better and better evidenced even since, the last time I've done one of these fasts, called HMB, or beta hydroxymethyl butyrate. This is a downstream product from leucine, leucine being one of the most important branched chain amino acids. So when you're in a fasting state, as you're dropping and you shift over to ketosis, and you're dropping fat tissue, depending on your genes, which we identify as well, of course, at the DNA company, you will sort of shift, over into, eating your muscles, way over a simplified way of putting it, but you can start to degenerate, your muscle mass as well. So to offset that, the evidence around beta hydroxymethyl butyrate, HMB for short, is very good, very clear. So you'd want to, I think, supplement with that during a fasted state, something more than 1 day for sure.
And one thing you said there about eating muscle, this is a major benefit to elongated fasts that isn't spoken of, which is longitudinal brain health in terms of Alzheimer's and dementia prevention. Because I think everybody that's listening here already knows that your body prefers starch and sugar as a easy fuel to burn. It will always go there first. Then the assumption is second option is fat, but there's something in between, which is your own amino acids and muscle tissue and these frayed muscle tissues that enter the bloodstream. And the challenge with those is they can cross the blood-brain barrier and cause, plaque to build up. They can cause disturbances physically, like literally in the physical structure of the brain, which leads to cognitive decline. And when you're fasted, your body utilizes all that as fuel and gets rid of it all. So two things happen. You're void of it. So if you're sugar, you know that this is building up, which is one of the reasons why, diet can lead to Alzheimer's, because you're not getting rid of this stuff and it's crossing the blood-brain barrier. And the second thing is you're not getting to the fat. You think you are, but there's something in between that's preventing you, because fat, it takes 5 hours before your body can actually start to break down fat properly and use it. So a major outcome and benefit, and this one thing that anyone that I meet, that I say, hey, DNA company, genetics, first question is always, I don't want to know if I'm getting Alzheimer's. Do you do that? I don't want, because the belief is it's coming, right? It's just something that's coming. It's happening. It's in my genes, which we all here know is not true, unless it's a genetic condition, which, tiny fraction of what people are actually dealing with. So major outcome. The other outcome in terms of body recomposition, there's no faster way to get into that ketosis fat burning state than to just be void of all calories and nutrients. So day 2, day 3, did you start seeing fat melting off, or what did it seem like?
Yeah, no, I definitely felt the pants fitting differently, clothes starting to, hang a little looser. And I thought I also, one of the things I tried to maintain, unless I felt otherwise a little too dizzy or lightheaded, was some, simple isometrics, some calisthenics, just, me against gravity. And I was fine doing it. And although no calories in, I think that advantaged me in some ways, and it's not contraindicated. Again, you got to listen to your body. I wouldn't call it melting off. I think my net result was about 8 pounds, which doesn't sound like a lot on 0 calories. So to one of your points very early on, it's just a perfect example of how we don't actually need as many calories on a frequent or regular basis. So this idea of what I default to, especially in a clinical practice sense, is evolutionary biology. And this is the story of genetics. I mean, we haven't evolved anywhere nearly as much as we think we have, from early ancestor days. Tens of thousands of years have gone by where phenotypically or physically, maybe we have a little less hair, maybe our lips have thinned out and we've less prognatic expression, but brain size, composition, hormones, pretty much all the same. Like these hormones that I was talking about in terms of this big reset button, it's like a symphony that hasn't changed for millennia, and each of them need to be tuned up. And we've used to be doing that. Our ancestors, we used to go from fast and famine to eating large amounts. So fasting conducts this symphony, beautifully. Insulin, that was, as I alluded to earlier, we reduce insulin spikes. We enhance our body's sensitivity to this hormone. And it's not about blood sugar alone. Of course, it's about preventing chronic disease by balancing that blood sugar and resetting it. Along with its sister, IGF-1 is another marker that helps to essentially signal insulin as insulin growth factor. So this plays a role in growth and aging. And fasting lowers its levels and slows the aging process indirectly through that. And I think what you're alluding to as well is mTOR. At the end of the day, this nutrient is like a sensor. It's crucial for cell growth, muscle mass growth, but fasting can put this pause necessarily on mTOR, which might trigger cellular repair like the autophagy. Just, get the hell out of my body, half dead or dying cell, mutant cell, get out of here. And then all those others, leptin, adiponectin, ghrelin, all of these things reset. So, it's not about, how many pounds net did I lose? It was how many years did I put on my life? And I have to imagine that anytime I've done it, it's 3 times I've done the full 5-day in total. Once there at Mount Shiga-San and a few other times when I wasn't feeling at my best and I need to reset. And I just felt like I probably put a year, maybe 2 on my life, and science supports that.
So we have a patient who, I'd say about 2 years ago, the wife had cancer and he was very sick. Wife unfortunately passed away. We met them too late in the game, let's say. The husband, he had like bleeding coming out of his back and weird spots and migraines, couldn't function. It was pretty rough. And there was a couple things going on, including some toxic water that they were exposed to. So there was a reason. It was figured out eventually. And he also had gained a ton of weight, which he had never done before, couldn't understand it. The body wants fat as a place to deposit and store toxins to protect you. It's very hard to lose weight when you're in a toxic environment. And so he, after his wife passed, we had worked with him at that point. We then understood what was going on in his body. He understood what was going on in his environment. And, this reset that you keep talking about, this like tune-up type situation, we put him on a 7-day fast and he did it. Like he had the mindset to get it done. He was in pain and didn't want to be anymore. And after 7 days, he was a different person. It was as if none of these problems had ever happened, right? So the body and its ability to heal and reverse the damage, it's stuff that feels permanent, right? Stuff that feels like this is now me. This is who I am. The ability to literally turn back time, reverse, and be a different version of yourself. The guy looked like you could not recognize him, right? And he all of a sudden became very confident, having a lot of events and parties and stuff, inviting everyone to see this new version of himself, right? Uh, he went on a 7-day fast, the one that we're actually going to talk about later today, and completely reset every bodily system. The way he ate changed, his hormones changed, mood changed. He was having depression issues all gone. The body, like you said, eliminated all the bad and made room for more good. And all of a sudden, this guy went from a barely survive to thrive state, truly thrive state, healthiest he'd ever been. So what we think is potentially a threat or not natural or not safe. I don't know anyone that has done this, that hasn't come out the other end saying that this is the best I've ever felt.
Yep. No, and I think we have to be careful about starting folks, in a easing into it fashion. I don't think it's, starting a regimen can be daunting,
Yeah.
so definitely easing into it's important. Staying hydrated throughout, not just water, but also being careful with electrolytes. It's the first thing that you can become very seriously imbalanced with: sodium chloride, magnesium, calcium, things that make your heart work and your muscles contract. First thing is cramping, in the calves. You don't want that to start. And be mindful of, nutrient intake on the other end. We did that wrong the first time around, although I didn't suffer any major consequence. But when you do reintroduce food, not too much, got to reestablish that connection and those digestive enzymes, which have taken a break. And you want to take it slow and reintroduce certain foods slowly. And I think that, it's also important, other than these, hormones that we talked about, and the which ultimately are responsible for the immune system, the connection between brain and body for satiety. There's also a whole other classification. We study these at the DNA company, the sextoridal pathway. That does a big reset also. And that's also because, largely excessive fat that we store, because we're trying to get toxins out of our system, away from our brain. One mechanism of action. Another one is, changes and shifts in hormones that are rites of passage, like menopause, for example. But nonetheless, storing fat tissue or excessive fat tissue, and also hypercaloric diets, causes certain hormones to upregulate almost regardless of your genetic susceptibilities. And then there's the neurotransmitters. Those are another classification of hormones that do a big reset as well. I've seen in clinical practice fasting, and again, my experience typically lends into the 2 to 3 days with my patients at a time. I don't usually extend them into the 5-day. Not that they can't, but nothing I've guided them towards in any major capacity. It's not easy, but it definitely does seem to have that big reset button effect at people. And the studies are evident. The studies are pretty clear around cancer, avoidance or prevention of cancer, and these markers for longevity, that go beyond even the methyl clocks. Seems to be evident that we're putting years on our lives by doing, even that very popular 5-2, eat 5 days, fast 2 days. And with the intermittent fasting 16-8 rule, anytime you can enter the body into autophagy and have a hormetic stress that's safe and effective, then you're doing well.
Yeah. So to that last point, this is where everybody needs to jump in and do something. And I recognize that that's a kind of force, right?
Yeah, no, it's just when you talk a long time and
Yeah.
but you got, yeah, you got
I
it.
would say that's one of the greatest substances on the planet that Bryce also introduced me to, by the way. One of the reasons why I don't get sick anymore, that echinacea extract, as soon as you feel that tingle, you spray it, you're not going to get sick. It's that potent, right? It's awesome. So to the last thing you're saying. So for everybody here who's probably regretting showing up today, you're now we're going to tell you what you need to do. But first, in the Q&A box, how many of you already intermittent fast? Whether it's a couple days a week, whether it's every day, just put a yes into the Q&A. And how many of you don't? Put a no into the Q&A box. And don't be shy if it's a no, no problem. So we have, and by the way, there's a couple questions here that we'll get to also. So yes, yes, yes. The yeses came first, loud and proud, of course. Dirk wants to get started. He's open to it. Michael on our team also intermittent faster. I see DL, sorry, don't have your full name here, every day. Tracy, our glorious leader, the CEO of the DNA company, is an intermittent faster. She's also a rock star at the gym, I can tell you that. When I first started working with her, we had a time zone issue because she was in California. So I'd always be interrupting her morning workout and hearing about these deadlifts and stuff going on. I was like, what's going on? Okay, so I see a lot of yeses and a couple of no's, which is fine. Now, couple considerations. When it comes to male fasting versus female fasting, and then we're going to tell you what we're going to do here. What I've learned, and Bryce, you have a lot of knowledge here, so chime in. Men, every day, go for it, no problem. Intermittent fast, right? The more you do it, the better. Women, you have to pay attention to the circadian rhythm of the menstrual cycle and try and slow things down near the end of the cycle, right? The beginning, great, go for it. Hormone levels are high, everything is thriving, good for it. Go for it. Once you get near that sort of past that luteal phase into like it's about the cycle's about to start again, that last week when you're craving all the carbs and there's a reason why your body needs it. So whether it's I fast 2 days a week every week, or I focus my fasting in the beginning of the month and I just don't do it at the end of the month, think about that in terms of how and when to do this in terms of the female sex steroidal pathway, the female sex hormone. Males, every day, no problem, go for it, right? I don't know, Bryce, if you have any comments there.
I would always just sort of, invite folks to considering and thinking about this organ, the uterus, in that very specific phase as you're describing, mid-luteal to, end of cycle. There's a lot of energy that's being processed in order to ultimately evacuate. It is a large process, essentially what is a major autophagy process going on within this uterus. So your body needs that additional support, let alone some of the micronutrients that women get deficient for in that very time as well. So yeah, no, absolutely. We are influenced by hormone cycles and as guys, but not anywhere near as much as women. I saw a note by Tina, I think it was, saying that she felt like she lost too much muscle when she did intermittent fasting. Might have been that exact reason. Not to mention HMB, as I mentioned earlier, something both men and women can take all the time, but also, and the studies don't show you're putting on muscle. The studies are very evident that you prevent muscle wasting or anti-sarcopenic activity. So that's something that folks that do the intermittent fasting can take. It will not break the cycle of fasting. It is a net zero calorie amino acid, branched chain amino acid.
So now that we've surveyed everybody and some of you have responded, you're all participating in the challenge, whether you responded or not. That's why you're here. And it was important for us to know who has fasted yet or not because of what Bryce mentioned a couple times. Let's ease you into this, right? And let's meet you where you're at. So we're going to be doing two different things. For those of you that have never fasted, you're going to take this next week, and I mean starting Monday. Give yourself the weekend. Let yourself get over this, meditate on it for a couple days. Monday is your first fast. What does that mean? It means your eating window is 8 hours. And whether that means, you're going to not start eating until noon and end at 8 p.m., or whether that means you start eating at 8 a.m. and then, sometime in the afternoon you're done and it doesn't end. Some people eat 8 to 4, some people eat 1 to 8, so some people, it's better to do it earlier, right? As long as you're getting that window that I ate within this condensed time frame, and the balance of that time, my body has enough time to get into that autophagy state that Bryce is talking about, right? So if you've never done it before, try and do it for 2 days, right? That's all we're saying, 2 days. For those of you that have done it before, you're going to wish you didn't show up here today, because I am going to join you on a liquid fast where you have to do it for a minimum of 3 days. The ideal length is actually 10 days when you're doing a full liquid fast. And when I say liquid, including nutrients that allow you to get all the minerals you need. There's some cleanse that happens, elimination of mucal buildup in the intestines, removal of that. So there's a few things, and we're going to talk about those details now. If you're doing it for less than 3 days, if you give up a day and a half, 2 days, you may end up feeling worse because you're dislodged these toxins and they're kind of free flowing in your bloodstream. You're going to get migraines, etc. So if you're going to do it, we're doing it for 3 days. Ideally, like Bryce said, 5 is a great amount, 5 to 7, right? When it's being done therapeutically, like cancer patients, etc. Not that we're saying that this is a medical tool, but I do know cancer doctors that will prescribe a 10-day fast to somebody because the cancer cell thrives on glucose. If there's no glucose, it dies, right? So it's another outcome of not having glucose in your bloodstream. The fuel that fires some of the negativity that we don't like is not there. It's not present, right? Your gut resets, your brain resets, your hormones reset. Certain, senescent, dying, mutated, and cancer cells die off. The things that we don't want, right? So now this particular fast, I'm only suggesting it because it's something that I've done in this, and I promised you in the very beginning, the purpose of this longevity challenge is to show you the things that I did, right? I learned how to breathe. You guys all attended that, right? I learned about environmental toxins. So there's no such thing as detox without removing the tox. If you're still swimming in toxic soup, go ahead and keep popping your pills. What is the point of that, right? So removal was a key thing for me in my healing journey, which is why on our last call we talked about that. And we talked about cosmetics, we talked about mold, the things that are underlying and often present that we don't recognize and don't do anything about, especially the cosmetics, that silent killer, 500 chemicals a day for women. So we talked about that. We talked about breathing, big change for me, learning what happens with nitric oxide production when it goes through your nasal cavity. What happens when you actually structure your skull properly and the release of things like migraines. Now we're talking about third big thing I did, inspired by the man you see here, Bryce, because when I first heard him say it, I said that just as a challenge, I'd like to be able to say I've done it, right? The protocol I used was slightly different because I was trying to go for longer, which meant I needed certain nutrients, mainly minerals. And so the protocol I used was 6 drinks of water, your typical water glass per day. Again, trying to keep the stomach full, as Bryce said. The longer you go through this, the easier it is to do that. Your body will give you what you're demanding. No food, okay, stomach shrinks. This nutrient level is good enough. I don't need any protein for a while. I'm gonna burn off some fat, right? Now, the water plus organic maple syrup. This is where your minerals come from, right? And there's a low the sugars that are in maple syrup don't drive the glycemic spike that you would get from like a white sugar, right? Third is lemon, organic lemon. Make sure it's all clean because again, this is not only Don't think of this as a fat burning exercise. This is a reset, detox, and yes, as a byproduct, fat burning exercise. But really, these first two things are more important: reset, detox. Again, in order to detox, you have to remove the tox. So make sure the ingredients are clean, healthy, organic, right? Third thing is cayenne pepper. By the way, I'll share a link with you guys on dosages and exact levels to include. The maple syrup is going to give you some fuel. It's going to give you minerals. It's very rich in minerals if you get proper grade A Canadian, by the way, maple syrup. And the cayenne pepper and lemon sort of strip the years of buildup in your gut tract off. There's two other things we need to do. A salt cleanse daily in the morning. So starting on day 2, you're drinking, and I'm again going to give you the exact protocol: a couple spoons of salt, sea salt, proper, non-iodized table. We're not talking about table salt. We're talking about proper sea salt, which again is rich in minerals. It allows you to, again, cleanse. There's going to be an exit, let's just say, right? There's going to be an exit. You're going to clean things out. So all that's being dislodged gets removed. The third layer, which I would start later, and the longer you're able to do this, the more effective this is clay. So there's a bentonite clay, which Bryce can tell you a lot about. Mix it with water, drink it, and it's like this, glue that pulls everything off and removes it as it's being dislodged from the gut tract. So a few things happen. Yes, you're going to lose fat. You'll probably also lose visceral fat that's on your organs, the belly, the hard stuff that's hard to get rid of. More importantly, you're going to bring your gut back to what it was when you were young without all that toxic activity built up around it. You're going to bring your mood and brain and neurochemicals back, your hormones back. You're going to kill off all the stuff that we keep talking about. And you're literally going through an entire, let's call it renovation or tune-up reset as a new version of yourself. The way you will feel if you can do it for and I would say you don't need to do it for 10 days the first time, 5 to 7 if you can. Incredible, incredible outcome. You'll be the best version of yourself. There's the eczema that I had, gone. The migraines I had, gone. The psoriasis I had, gone. Everything was gone. I didn't have them anymore. This was all the outcome of what was going on the inside. Genetic, let's say suboptimal abilities. There were certain things not going at the foundation level. Layer on top of that my environment, my nutrition, and years and years and years of that layering on equals eventually a threshold that your body can no longer tolerate, which we call disease, because the symptom has a name. And I had multiple symptoms, don't have any of them now, right? So I treat this as not an annual, but sort of a kind of like what Bryce just said. You kind of know when your body needs more, right? When it's time. And it's a tool that can be in your toolkit to then reset again and again and again. And every time you're doing that reset, you're adding years and years and years. You're taking away misery and misery and misery. The way you would have felt if you didn't do this reset 20 years from now, you don't need to feel that way. You could be the optimal version of yourself. So the protocol, I'm going to link here, but keep in mind, this is what we're saying is it's water, room temperature or warm, like Bryce said, to give your stomach that sense of satiety. It's just easier on your gut. Cayenne pepper, salt, maple syrup. If you're going to do it for less than 3 days, don't do it. You may feel horrible. Day 2 especially. If you stop day 2, you're not going to feel so good, right? 3 days minimum, which means you're completing the full 72 hours. And on the 4th day, you may start to eat, meaning bone broth. This is something very important Bryce said. How do you get back to food, right? So getting back to food may mean bone broth and orange juice, like real proper, celery juice or something that's clean. A day later, you may get into solids, plants, that type of thing. And maybe 3 days later, eating what you used to eat. But you're also going to try eating the cookie or the snack that you used to eat. You won't want to eat it anymore. Your palate would also have been readjusted to its natural state that is no longer acclimated to garbage food. No, I'm not saying here everybody eats garbage food. For the most part, everyone is doing everything right here, and I respect that and appreciate that. But even that little thing that you used to do, right, whatever that is, you probably won't even enjoy it. You're going to put it into your mouth and like, what is this toxic stuff? Because your palate is going to be so clean. right? And it doesn't take long. So imagine it's not easy, but it doesn't take long. Few days and your body's reset itself again. So now for the people that have never done an intermittent fast, that's where you're going to start. And you're going to start, if you want a instruction, I would say keep it easy. You're waking up on a certain day and you're not eating until noon. Simple. You eat a meal at noon, you eat a second meal, ideally 6 p.m. But if you need to stretch it till 8, if you're worried about being hungry at night and binging, ideally 6 p.m., right? And then you're not eating anymore, but up until 8, 8-hour maximum window, right? And then you're doing that again the next day. The third day, you can go back to reincorporating breakfast. And if you find that you can get through those 2 days as a male, start to do 3, and then 4, and then 5, and eventually the entire week. And I can tell you that intermittent fasters that do this as a daily habit do not want to go back to, I don't eat sometimes until 4 or 5 p.m. in the day. And guess what? I'm going to the gym in that state. A full intense, I lift heavy weights, right? I don't need food to be able to lift heavy weights, even if it's at 6 p.m., if I haven't eaten the entire day. So I practice something religiously called Ramadan. And I'm only telling you this because it will give you an idea of what your bodies are capable of. So I live in Toronto, and meaning that there's long days in the summer. Our religious calendar is a lunar calendar, so it moves back a month every year, or 3 weeks-ish, which means Ramadan happens at a different time every year. And a couple months ago, it was happening in the peak of summer, which meant that I was eating between, I think it was 10 p.m. and 3 a.m. That was my window. Those were the open hours. So I was fasting from 3 a.m. to 10 p.m. So why am I telling you this? Because every day at 9 p.m., I went to the gym and did an entire full workout as if nothing had changed. Day 1, it wasn't easy. Day 2, it wasn't easy. Day 3, it made no difference if I had food or not. I would go fast the entire day, including liquids, nothing. And at 9 p.m., do an intense, proper workout like I would always normally do, knowing that as soon as my workout is done at 10, I can drink my water and eat my food and get the fuel I need. I'm telling you this because your body is capable of so much. And I do that for 30 days. 30 days of no food for that window, working out before I break my fast daily, and it's not a problem. In fact, the more I do it, the first few days, first 2-3 days, I make sure at 3 a.m. I eat a couple eggs, right? I'm getting something in. And at 10 p.m., I'm eating like a king. Because after a full day of fasting, you're like, give me that food, right? A week into it, I may not get up for that 3 a.m. egg anymore. The third week, I'm not eating that morning meal at all. I literally don't need it. And the size of my night meal is come to half. And I have not lost any muscle mass. In fact, I sometimes gain. Again, telling you this because you don't jump into it, but 30 days, you can reset your metabolism in your body to the point where you're eating half a meal with, keep in mind that heavily concentrated on protein, right? To maintain muscle mass, because I do work out. Half a meal a day. And I'm feeling better than when I had an open window to eat food all day long. And I'm going to the gym every day. And I'm working all day. Right? And no other activity, my normal daily activities have stopped. This makes me feel incredible. And this is if you were to ask me, what are the things you did? Why do you feel different? Why is your biological age younger? This is one of the reasons. So we're going to do it now. Again, you're going to figure out which bucket you're in. You already know. I've never fasted. 2 days of intermittent fasting. Learn how to do it. Try it. And it's as simple as, can I do 6 hours or 8 hours, no more than 8 hours of eating window, right? The easiest way to do it, first meal at noon, second meal at 6 p.m., and you're done. You're doing that twice. Third day, after your second sleep, you're eating like normal. Try that. Try it and see how you may feel on the third day and how you may not even need that breakfast, how your body immediately starts responding to caloric intake that, by the way, I'm not saying to eat less food. I'm saying to eat it in less time. So this is another thing that's important. That first meal, when you're intermittent fasting, should be a large meal. Because when you're hungry, you do not want to signal starvation. When you're hungry and you eat a little, it signals to your body, this is why I'm hungry. There's no food. So your body will start to store fat. And we see this. People will intermittent fast and actually gain weight because your body's intelligent. It wants to protect you. And if you're getting tiny meals thinking that, oh, I'm fasting, I'm going to eat less. No, you're going to eat what you would normally eat, if not more. So fuel your body. You're just doing it in less time, right? With that, we have a bunch of questions. Before questions, Bryce, you have anything you want to add?
That was a great comprehensive coverage. You know, I would say listen to your body during that longer prolonged fast and outside of the concoction, which has been affectionately termed sort of the master's, detox over the years or variation on it. Uh, if you do start to feel cramping or heart fluttering, by the way, let me preamble by just saying before you start anything different, whether it's a supplement ingredient or it's sort of the suggestion for a fast, always speak to your doctor or healthcare provider to make sure that it's safe for you. And that should take nothing less than an email or phone call these days in the world of online access to primary healthcare physicians, because neither Kashif nor I are that for you. But listening to your body, getting twitches, getting cramps, in the process, getting too lightheaded, that would signal electrolyte imbalance. Excuse me. And the general rule of thumb is that this cleanse, this formula should have enough to keep you through. But always think of the primary ones. There are supplements to have at the handy, or even little powders you could take a scoop out of, which is in general a 1 to 0.5 to 0.5 of sodium to potassium to magnesium to calcium. So just keep that in mind. Some kind of electrolyte, free from clean product that has this 1 to 0.5 to 0.5 ratio of those primary electrolytes. You take a little bit, you put in some water and drink that back, and that should, balance everything.
Cool. And I think Michael, he's already dropped on Beam Minerals in there, which can help. There's also Redmond's, Michael. I don't know if we have an association with them or not, but they have the mineral salts, which are electrolyte rich. So now, having said that, there's a bunch of questions, so let's get into them. Okay, so we can get you a discount on Beam, not on Redmond, so focus on Beam. Mineral rich, I think they have the full spectrum of like 61 minerals in there, so you're getting everything you need. And they do have two products. One is a sort of your daily mineral, and one it's labeled as an electrolyte blend, like that's the purpose of it. So that's the one you're looking for. Okay, so there's questions here. Dirk is saying, how does this relate to people who do calorie restriction in order to extend their life? So we talked about that, which is that intermittent fasting, the caloric restriction, having a smaller, well, let's say this, not caloric restriction in terms of eating less than the recommended amount of food. It's eating that food in a smaller time frame. That's what we said. So the mistake is you don't want to underfuel yourself. You don't want to underfeed yourself. You'll make yourself sick. You want to fuel yourself just in less time.
It's also the practice of compliance. This is a lot easier to do occasional prolonged fasting and then go back to a healthy diet, which serves you for your basal metabolic rate. That is to say, how many calories you are burning without exercise at the very least, versus staying hungry. None of us are meant to be like that. That stresses the body. But paradoxically, the science has been pretty clear, mainly rat models. If you talk to Charles Brenner, it's different than if you talk to Dr. David Sinclair at Harvard. It's like kind of a mixed bag. But the science is pretty clear in rat models that if you come under 200 to 300 calories under their basal metabolic rate, you're putting years on their life. No one's doing that. No one's going to stay, if my caloric burn without exercise in a day is roughly 2,000 calories, I'm just not going to do 1,700 calories a day. It's uncomfortable. But I will do, 2,000 with a 16-8 window. It's very comfortable. I'll eat that 2,000 within that 8 window, to Kash's point. Heavier meal on the front end. Only eat during that 8-hour fasting window. And then every couple of months, do a day or two fast. could do it more periodically than that. But it seems like the literature is becoming more and more evident that that kind of behavior in human populations may actually extend our lives equally or better than, subcaloric value on a daily basis. And no one's going to do it.
And Dirk had another question about Ari. Since Bryce was talking about hormetic stresses and hormesis, yes, we believe that Ari's work is awesome. It's a great place to go in terms of a resource. He, upregulating mitochondrial function and energy through hormetic stresses, great resource.
And what he talks about, and we talk about, getting rid of dead villi, right, in the gut, in order to expunge or get rid of that and create a new gut. All our cells turn over, but this speeds up the process and invites new ones. We talk about lung, alveolar, cilia regeneration through autophagy, white blood cell regeneration through autophagy. But one of the most important things is within viable, healthy cells, and he talks about this, is mitophagy, so mitochondrial autophagy. Your mitochondria are constantly dividing at a rapid pace, and they should be in their higher concentration in your heart and your brain. And there are certain things like fasting, which actually in healthy, viable cells will allow dead and dying or subactive viable mitochondria just to shut down and be cleared by the lysosomes in the cells and just expunged from the cells. So healthy, viable cells get to have brand new factories that make the currency of energy for your body, which is ATP. That's why energy on the back end of a fast is so much better. You've increased your mitophagy as well as your overall cell autophagy.
So there's a couple more Bryce questions here. Dirk's asking, would you use green tea powder as a spice in foods? Would you gain any benefit from that?
I mean, you can. The literature is pretty clear that it's the 2 to 3 times a day for concentrated theanine. By the way, you mentioned at the top, one of the things I do is travel the world doing my due diligence, boots on the ground into the manufacturers of the raw materials that supply the consumer facing brands in a nutshell. So, my deep dive in Japan was looking at a company called Tayo. Tayo manufactures the best green tea powders on the planet. But when we're looking for alpha wave induction or the benefit you'll get from theanine, if you enjoy green tea, wonderful. If you like green tea on your food, great. But if you want to take theanine in supplement form, you look for sun-theanine. It's a patented ingredient, which we use at the DNA company, by the way, particularly as it pertains to certain forms of what we consider executive function, mood and behavior, and upregulation of certain neurotransmitters for certain people. But this has been proven in the literature at that 200 to 300 milligrams, 2 to 3 times a day to increase focus, attention, alertness, concentration. Hundreds, plural, of studies that evidence this, human clinical trials, blinded, placebo-controlled, multi-center trials, even 5 done on children to improve ADHD, particularly by improving sleep, nighttime depth and quality of sleep, translating into the next day attention and focus. So long-winded way of saying, usually eating yourself to therapeutic range is kind of difficult to do. There's other advantages you get from green tea powder, like the EGCG, epigallocatechin gallate. That's another incredible bioflavonoid. We use that to temper, the UGT genes and some other aspects of the hormonal steroidal pathways. For clearance of testosterone, et cetera. But so the whole form is wonderful. I'm drinking it right now. But to get a therapeutic range of green tea on your food or in your liquid beverage, you're talking about 10 to 15 cups a day or many, many meals with a lot of green tea powder on it. So hard to achieve a therapeutic range for medicinal purposes that way.
And Terry, you're asking about, the comment about BDNF, and if your BDNF is suboptimal, is this still relevant? It's even more relevant. What we're saying is if your BDNF genes are suboptimal, and the comments Bryce made about BDNF upregulation, it's more of a priority to you, it's that fertilizer that grows the brain, so you want a lot of it, right?
And so to that end, the whole story here is especially as we sleep, and especially as we sleep with good sleep hygiene, particularly in a cool, dark environment. So cool being the underscored operative term here, cool being 64 to 68 degrees. What happens is glymphatic activity. So in the brain, there's these non-thinking glial cells, which just basically sweep up the mess of endotoxins. And this is the point of fasting, to expunge and get rid of not the ethereal plumes of smoke from industrial. That's important too, because we accumulate that. But day-to-day oxidative stress, these glial cells sweep up that mess. They do it so much better, and they become more active during fasting. You will clear out your brain. So our body has lymphatics, clears stuff out. Our brain has glymphatics, or glial cells, that work to clear out the toxins. Studies are very clear about increasing glial activity. What that does is, not only is BDNF upregulated, but that allows BDNF to activate even better, because a new cell connection, a brand new neuron that's trying to reach another neuron, is the most susceptible to toxins in the environment. So when glial cells are clearing it all out, it has its full ability to make that neogenesis, or new cell connection. People with low BNF, that's where they have problems, or that's where they struggle, as the neogenesis. So it's actually, just to your point, Kashif, that's more indicated for her.
Dirk's concerned about, he's heard about being in ketosis too long can be harmful for the kidneys. And is this something that we sustain, or what is the right amount of ketosis, essentially?
So there's a lot of misunderstanding around kidney clearance, kidney function, even as it pertains to protein. The new recommendations, within the realm of experts that study this very closely, is 1 gram per pound of body weight. Most of us don't get that. People with taxed kidneys, this was the dietetics recommendation: no more of 1 pound, or even a half pound to 1 pound per kilogram. So we're talking 2 to 3 times as much protein. And why I'm saying that to begin is because, the nitrogen is, or the clearance capacity, and we look at this, a biomarker called EGFR, or glomerular filtration rate, of the kidney's ability to clear nitrogen, and some of the metabolic end result of protein. When you go into ketosis, now you're dealing, with fat, and your body's expending fat, and using that as the caloric source. So that's less taxing than a high protein diet. By the way, once again, know your EGFR, know your kidney health, know your kidney clearance. This is not advisable for diabetics, particularly, type 1, obviously. Type 2, depending on where you are, and your doctor gives you a pink slip to say you can do this medically supervised, sure. But generally speaking, the 3, 4, 5-day fast that we're talking about, there is zero chance that you're going to have kidney taxation through ketosis.
Yeah.
Not at all.
So there's a concern over, beneficial gut bacteria dying from lack of fiber, and what happens. So, it's somewhat the opposite of is what I've seen, where we have an overgrowth of the bacteria we don't want because we're feeding it with garbage, starchy, sugary food. And that in itself leads to symptoms that we don't relate back to the gut, because and this is something that I learned from Mansoor and Bryce, by the way, that negative gut bacteria, the flora that we are not supposed to have in large numbers, when it is in large numbers because you've been eating the wrong food, the poop from that bacteria is really toxic. And there's women that are diagnosed with fibromyalgia that literally just have toxic poop causing them inflammation because of their imbalance of gut microbiome, right? So that stuff is the first to go. It's if you've ever heard of like a candida fast, it's the same thing. Those people don't come out of it needing to repopulate. They come out of it balanced, right? You've got rid of the bad stuff, and the good stuff somehow thrives.
Yeah, it's all about competition for real estate down there. And the story is really around diversity. And a lot of these potentially pathogenic and even pathogenic bacteria and yeasts that we tend to flourish when we have bad diet, as you mentioned, they are the first to go. They take up the most space, and very quickly. And they're competitive, although many of them non-pathogenic are competitive against the commensal bacteria, for which, in numbers will reduce. So, as some of the best cities in the world are built around invitation to multi-ethnicity, so is our gut. The more ethnic diversity we have down there, multiple strains and species, the better off that we are. And so a fast can do that, can push the red reset button there as well. There is something that I advise certain people that, and by the way, SIBOs, people with small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, because that's even harder to address in many cases, do even better from fasting. They actually do terribly from introduction of certain bacteria because they go to war, and then there's this big die-off phenomenon. But so SIBO, people with small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, do incredibly well from a 5-day fast. That's actually one of the populations I alluded to that I would put on a 2 to 3 day fast, and then a reintroduction schedule. But you can use soluble fiber during your fast. It's a net zero. And by the way, another thing I learned with the Japanese, the Buddhist monk, it's already embedded within their cultures, something called hara hachi bu, which it loosely translates into the concept of eat until you're 80% full. So they abide by that culturally. They're not, they have smaller plates, not stuffing their face with, an abundance of buffet. And this can translate like, what the hell is 80% full? Well, the average stomach might be roughly 2 liters. And if you do the quick and dirty back in the napkin cowboy math, that means about 400 milliliters is where you kind of want to put the brakes on. Eat until you have that 1.6 liter mark. But again, what the heck is that? Okay, so let's make it super easy. Outside of your fasting routine, you just take soluble fiber in couple of scoops and 400 milliliters of water. Anyone can measure that out, and you drink that back before you have a meal. You're going to get a prebiotic, fiber, and you're going to fill your stomach up by 400 mils, leaving only roughly 1.6 liters left to eat. So that's just one tip or trick. But I was just mentioning that only in context of the fast. If you're one that is known to have dysbiosis or imbalanced good and bad bacteria, no harm in taking a little bit of soluble fiber during your fast. It's not going to cause you to, fill up or give you these macronutrients. There's no caloric to, but it can feed an already struggling good bacterial culture. It will not feed the bad bacteria in your gut. And I'd recommend people look for guar bean, versus inulin or some of these other things that are non-FODMAP approved. They can tend to, cause the very symptoms you're looking to avoid, which is bloatedness.
Yeah.
So anyways, little tip.
So Terry's already doing a 14-hour fast. So Terry, just keep in mind, if it's again with female fasts, you want to think about the cycle and the month, right? But if you're doing it and you feel great, good. Pay attention to that last week in the cycle and how you feel, and maybe make an adjustment. Simona's asking side effects from B minerals, nausea. So Simona took B minerals and felt nausea. I have not heard that. The only thing I could say, and Bryce, know supplements better than anyone I know, so you may have a comment, is that when you have, so Beam has this really cool combination which includes fulvic minerals. And fulvic minerals do something that we're supposed to be getting from our food, and our body relies on this process of detoxification from fulvic minerals that we don't do because it's not in our food because the soil's dead, right? So if your body hasn't been doing it for a while, there may be some acclimating, getting used to, which fulvic minerals sort of bring and draw nutrients into your cell, and then their electric charge reverses, and as like a magnet, they collect all the nonsense and remove it. Right. So if that hasn't been happening for you a while, that's the only thing I could think of, that all of a sudden you're adding these minerals, which don't make you feel sick, that you may be in this detox state, right? Because all of a sudden you've added a tool that does that for you.
Very possibly. Yeah, I would. Fulvic acid and fulvic minerals are many, many, many miracles for which science yet still has to prove out in the standard biological mechanisms of action, but really wonderful preliminary research around them to balance, as you put it, extracellular, intracellular charge,
Yeah.
and get the cell acting in a way. Detoxification is not on a macro level. It's on a cellular, microscopic level, and we look at these genes, these detox genes, and a lot of people suffer with the inability to detoxify effectively. Fasting is so intended for those individuals as well as a lifestyle practice, those that have null variants with their GSTT1, GSTM1, GSTP1A, or A variants. Those, and I think that fulvic acid and the B minerals would be excellent for them. Anything, by the way, on an empty stomach that's got zinc, and some of the other trace minerals can cause minor nausea that's very short-lived. That's just another side note.
Pat and DL are both asking, that you know, they're in menopause, so they need to concern themselves with fasting less because there's no longer a menstrual cycle?
I wouldn't say so. No. I mean, one of the things that happens in menopause, particularly if you enter menopause as an estrogen dominant female, um, is that you come from a place where you're used to having both an excess of estrogen production. And also, in many instances, also individuals who just have, an ability at the cellular level to receive estrogen more vivaciously. So, when you go into menopause, you are left in, a more rapid decline. Your body's hungrier for estrogen. So its default mode, the mechanism of which is a survival mechanism, is to store a lot more fat than the average person. And so that process can be not reversed entirely, but can be mitigated or tempered by more of a practice in the intermittent fasting and or prolonged occasional fasting states. So I just think menopausal women at large, especially those who are coming from estrogen dominant states and are proven that way genetically, would fare even better than the average person this way.
So Pat's also saying she has Hashimoto's. And again, she's 20 years into menopause. She's wondering if this will alter her T3 and T4 production. She's also asking about liver. In terms of liver, it can do nothing but support and help. Like you're going to be, you know, that lipogenesis, that fat production that happens in the liver, and all the load from toxins from food, and that work is not happening for days. And all of a sudden, the liver goes into a heal state. But in terms of T3 and T4, I don't know what your thoughts are, Bryce.
Some of this depends on where they're at in their phase of diagnoses. If it's early on, there's something called the honeymoon phase where this might be contraindicated. Again, always talk to your doctor, healthcare provider before starting something like this. But I would say that if this has been dealt with for some time, so Hashimoto's and Graves is part of a classification of autoimmunity. The body attacks its own tissue, in this case, the thyroid. I would strongly recommend that this individual just cut all gluten out of their diet. This has long been understood as something that persists, this drives this mechanism, among other things. That aside, the body is now attacking the thyroid, and the thyroid's manufacturing, in many instances, more T3 and T4. T4 converts into T3 in the periphery. So as long as it's all managed effectively in the numbers, we understand thyroid peroxidase, TPO, she would be seeing that higher. That's a marker, an anti-TG that says your body's attacking your thyroid. Remember what we talked about earlier, I'm now speaking to this individual, in that you can push this immunological reset button. This is not only indicated even more for you, so long as, again, your medication is in play and your numbers are normal and your doctor approves it. You might see on the other end of a prolonged fast that everything is, or a lot is better. I'm not talking about, it's very hard to get the immune system to forget, but you can certainly temper it and mitigate it by fasting. So, and by the way, I just kind of have to throw this out because anytime I hear autoimmune thyroiditis, I have to talk about lemon balm. I've just had such good clinical success, not in the literature necessarily, or at least not strongly, but lemon balm to manage Hashimoto's just seems to be something I've found very effective.
So Simona has a couple more thoughts. She's asking about bone broth. I've actually seen people do a bone broth fast. It's not the same thing as what we're talking about, because what we're saying is 0 calories, right? And so not quite the same, but you could, if it's easier for you to adjust yourself to like not eating. People have done this, and I think somebody, Bryce, you introduced me to Kellyanne Petrucci. She does a bone broth regimen and fast. So it's a different way of doing things, but it's
Yeah,
not the
this
same.
one's typically going to keep you, a little more satiated. I would argue again, I don't know, depending on, it's a very small amount of maple syrup, but that can become micro caloric. Not that it's going to shift anything in the wrong direction, but depending on how much bone broth, that's more of a longer term liquid diet fast versus a give your body a total break
Yeah.
into autophagy fast.
And Simona is also asking me a longer fast. I think you're good, Simona. You can start because if you've already been intermittent fasting, you're already used to saying no to food, you're good to go, you know. Make sure you can handle it for 3 days. Dirk, can you design this for a vegan, no bone broth? Yeah, so what I'm going to be putting a link in here for you guys is, you know, it's lemon, maple syrup, cayenne pepper. That's it. There's also some salt and there's some clay. No animal products, right? So you should be good. Nina, can you give us the exact supplements we should take with a 5 to 7 day fast? So I'm gonna actually drop it in here now. So this is not from us. This is a link from a website that has the protocol that I've been talking about. And I took a look, they spell it out correctly in terms of what to take. So I'll drop that in here. It's actually a maple syrup company that we have no affiliation with, never spoken to, but you know, they put this out there as a way of selling their maple syrup, right? They actually sell the fasting kits. You can actually get it from them. Never talk to them, don't know them, but they had laid it out properly in terms of the salt wash. That's one thing. The actual formula, which is the cayenne pepper, maple syrup, and lemon. And they also have a pre and post diet recommendation. The pre, I don't think you need to do if you've already been intermittent fasting, like we said, those are the people that will start this. The post, you may want to pay some attention to. You want to ease back into food, right? So can you give us the exact supplements you should take with a 5 to 7 day fast? The one thing Bryce was talking about in terms of maintaining muscle mass, really that's the only thing here. Bryce, you can comment on that.
So, you know, I would strongly recommend it. It is the downstream metabolite of leucine, which is a branched amino acid. It's hard to get this in your daily diet anyway. You can take it all year and keep it during your fast, but it's called HMB, which is short form for beta hydroxy beta methylbutyrate. I've done my due diligence on this, and I like there's an ingredient that's just been very well evidenced. Again, it's found in multiple products. I'm not necessarily talking about a product, but an ingredient you can find in products called patented as MyHMB, just MYHMB. And that does have incredible proof to maintaining muscle mass. Because again, it doesn't, you know, anyone, even a seasoned veteran, faster, as of day 3, you start to lose a little bit of muscle mass.
Yeah. And Dirk is asking about, so this goes back to what we were saying about maintaining your daily activities. He's saying that he's training for a marathon, he's running every second day. Can I keep going? Yes, you can keep going. If you're now, Dirk, it looks like you're talking about the intermittent fasting because you're talking about 2 days, which was the intermittent protocol we talked about. You might find if it's your first time that tired, lightheaded, you know, this overall sense of weakness, let's say. And I find that when I'm in that state and I go to the gym, the hunger and the weakness goes away. Because when you signal to your body that it's time to go, it gives you what you need. Right. So in that, when I was talking about earlier, when I did the religious fast, which was 3 a.m. to 10 p.m., the least hungry hour for me was the last hour when I was working out. And it would sometimes screw up my protocol because I wouldn't even be hungry. 6 p.m., 4 p.m. Can't wait to eat. Right? 9 p.m. I start working out. I literally lose my appetite. And I would sometimes not even desire food. So why am I saying that? Because yeah, you can keep doing the workout. And if you feel like, oh, I'm too tired, I'm too weak, get up and move and see how quickly your body gives you what you need. Right?
I would say I'd say just on top of that, be extremely careful during your longer runs to supplement with electrolytes.
Yeah.
Again, sodium, potassium, magnesium, calcium in those situations, it's very important. and to your earlier point, the science is even stronger around maintaining muscle mass during fasting when you do some weight bearing activity.
Yep.
You signal retention. It's a complex pathway, but you're signaling the retention of that muscle mass. So simple stuff, push, pull, jump, squat, lift, push-ups, simple things that are not going to overly tax you, but it will keep the muscle on.
So Christy mentioned she used to do a lot of intermittent fasting, then she started feeling dizzy, not grounded. So if you go pay attention to the days that happened, you'll likely see that it was the tail end of your cycle. But she slowed things down. So go ahead and do your 5 and 2, like Bryce said, Monday, Thursday type fast. or focus your fasting in the beginning of the month. And Simona, would it be better to take B minerals after having a meal? I've done both. Like I've taken them on an empty stomach in the morning. I've taken them with food. From speaking to the founder, she said it didn't really matter. I don't know, Bryce, if you have a thought there.
So it's more important to be, if we're talking the difference between vitamins and minerals, it's more important that you're taking the vitamin coenzymes, particularly the Bs, with meals because they are actively, helping the citric acid cycle and your energy creation cycles metabolize, particularly in this case, carbohydrates. But yeah, you're right. I mean, it doesn't really matter. I would say generally, as a rule of thumb, I'd be taking vitamins and minerals with food, and botanicals, herbals, and most nutraceuticals between meals. That's just a general rule of thumb. Oh, and as it relates to exercise, most people don't realize this. Take antioxidants after, not before. They sweep up the mess and the oxidative stress. Taking them before literally can neutralize some of the damage that's purposeful at the microscopic level, to tear the muscles in order the body then recuperates and purposely heals to put more muscle back on. You're taking them before exercise and you're neutralizing that benefit to begin with. So it just reminded me to say that.
So someone's asking about hydrogen peroxide. She's taking this. Can she take it while she's fasting? H2O2.
hmm I don't have much of a comment around that. Some of the stuff, I just be careful with this stuff, and how you're consuming it. And,
Yeah.
um, as a, purgative or anti-helminthic or some of the reasons people are taking this, I think there's a lot safer things to be.
Oh, sorry, she clarified. Molecular hydrogen. Yes.
Oh, okay. That's a different
Yeah,
story.
very different. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
molecular hydrogen, there's no problem at all during a fast. In fact, I would that's one of those things I'd recommend to take, half an hour after eating or an hour before you eat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It will not disrupt or interrupt the fast. It will, in fact, support all of what Bryce was talking about in terms of the magic that happens, right? Very
And
powerful.
some of these tablets though that are flavored or even have, binders and fillers that I don't know, some of them are not clean.
Yeah.
I would avoid those because again, what we're trying to do, the most important thing around detoxification is often avoiding the very thing that you're looking to expunge or expel. So a lot of these things are not as clean as they should be. So look for a clean label. Molecular hydrogen.
So Dirk says he's excited. He's going to watch the replay and binge into this again. Uh, hold on. There's a couple more. One more question here. Um, it is one of Ari Wooden's new supplements. Yeah, there's a lot of people that are now making molecular hydrogen because big people like I would say Dr. Mercola and some other big names have been really pushing the benefits of it. So everyone's now starting to make it. And I think that's it. So we have, yeah, that's it. So we've been through your questions. You know what the task at hand is. Anyone, oh, sorry, there's a hand raised here. DL, did you want to get on live? Or type your question in? Or was
As
that
you're
next?
pulling, as you're pulling them in, I'll just finish off maybe as we arrange that last question that, we talked about a lot of, supplements. There really isn't a supplement or herb that can completely emulate, all the benefits of fasting. Fasting is the only thing that can do what fasting does. It's a very complex physiological process, as we've described somewhat, involving hormonal changes, obviously cellular repair and metabolic adaptations, all these different things. But some supplements and natural nutraceutical compounds have been studied. We use them at the DNA company for their potential to mimic certain aspects of fasting and its benefits. So one of those, because it plays into the hormonal pathways, steroidal hormonal pathways, resveratrol. Its potential to activate sirtuins, which are also part of this story, a group of proteins involved in cellular health and longevity. Berberine, alpha lipoic acid. We talked a little bit about, green tea and HMB. But I'd invite people to look at these as complementary and even consider taking them through, especially if they're indicated to them through their genetic 360 results, to take them throughout their fast, because they'll get double and triple benefits.
Yeah. And to Bryce's point about supplements, one thing I should mention is so we have this Ozempic phenomenon, right? People that are taking Ozempic to curb their appetite. There's these receptors, these GLP receptors that it kind of shuts off and turns your hunger off. And what we've learned is that bitter foods do the same thing. So if you were to take a bitter, it literally creates the same satiety, the same mechanism of the GLP pathway and shutting these receptors off and telling your body that I've had enough, which is kind of what Ozempic does. But this won't paralyze your gut. You know, these are just any bitter. It will just, it may help you not feel hungry, right?
And one of it's just interesting for some people to learn this. One of the ways in which that physiological mechanism occurs is that at the back of the tongue, we know that there's these the receptors, sweet, salty, taste, bitter. Evolutionarily, if we were to consume something bitter, that signaled to our body poison, and we would immediately evulse or want to evulse. It not necessarily cause full on, vomitus. But if you know and you override with your brain, this thing which is super bitter, I'm not going to die from, and you override with logic, your body still has this mechanism for which it kind of wants to get rid of. So it shuts down the desire to consume food and starts to put itself into a position of, I got to prepare myself to evacuate, but without causing this full, front and back end evacuation phenomenon. So yeah, just interesting. The emetics, or the cholagogues, which is what they're referred to in botanical medicine, really interesting category of food, of herb.
So we have one last thought. Yeah, we're already over time, so I'm gonna make sure, just to respect everyone's time, I'll quickly answer these last two. If someone has already done intermittent fasting, hasn't done it in a while, should she jump into the 3 to 5 day? So the purpose of why we're saying there's two groups here, the intermittent fasters and the liquid diet, it's not because it's prescriptive. It's more for you yourself to have the choice of taking baby steps and doing something smaller before you do something bigger. You can go ahead and do the water fast if you think you're going to survive it, right? Meaning mentally, it's more mental than anything else. It's not that your body won't survive it. It's more, can you handle it? And what we don't want is for you to stop on day 1, day 2, and feel bad because you can start removing toxins from your gut, etc. So it's more a mental thing. You already know if you're going to do it or not, right? So that was the purpose of, why not try some intermittent fasting first, get your body acclimated to it, and then go do this later, right? So it's not really a question of can I or not. It's you that need to know, can you or not, right? Second quick question was, if we've done intermittent fasting before but not quite a while, which fast should we? Okay, same question. It is best not to be traveling if doing a 3 day fast. So I've traveled many days while fasting. You just have to prep, right? Make sure that you're not. Well, the liquid fast tricky because you have to have your liquid with you, right? So I wouldn't do that if you're traveling. But your intermittent fasting, just make sure that it becomes a routine structure. What time are you at the airport? Right? Where do you have access to quality food? Because you cannot be closing your eating window and then eating junk, right? The window closes. So just structuring where you are, who you're with. There's a little bit of thinking, and it becomes habitual, right? It becomes part of your wiring and your thinking. So there you go, guys. So first of all, Bryce was only supposed to be with us for a few minutes to tell a story, and he stayed for the entire thing. So I want to thank him for giving this much time to all of us. And you can hear and experience how much knowledge is coming from this man, and what you've learned tonight. So thank you for Bryce for being here again. It's been taking so much time.
Thank you, and good luck to everyone who's getting into it.
And I will be starting on Monday. I'm going to give it the weekend to do my cheat days with the kids who need ice cream and pizza. And when I say that, it's very healthy ice cream and pizza that is made at home and clean. And then I'm going to start on Monday, right? So start with me, whoever's doing the liquid diet. If you're doing the intermittent, also try and start on Monday. Try and hit 2 days. If you can keep going, go ahead. But the liquid diet, again, minimum 3, aim for 5 to 7. And we'll talk to you on the next longevity challenge.